Hello, everyone. Dr. Nikhil Verma here with another edition of Things I Didn't Learn in Med School. Tonight, you might notice a different background and everything. I'm recording in my new apartment, first time recording from here, so hopefully everything goes well. Um, Obviously, dressed down, just came from the gym not too long ago, just getting my comfortable clothes and all that good stuff. Having my smoothie after a workout, highly recommended. For me, I don't really like dessert, so this fruit smoothie with protein, always hits the spot for me. Um, Tonight, I wanted to talk about a concept my friends and I were discussing today. In what do we do when a patient cancels or a patient no shows? How do we respond? What do we do with that? What's it look like? Um, I'll give you my own personal story about what I happened to me and what I'm doing now about this. As a smaller practice with only having one MA and just myself, I really can't afford to have 40, 50, 60 patients. Not that I'm even there yet, but at the beginning, it's hard to, really book out. If I'm seeing more than 20 patients a day, I'm really struggling, especially if more than 5 of those are new patients. The new patient intake form, the new patient analysis, and physical exam is a lot more in detail than a follow up. Um, and the work should reflect that. So I had educated my staff about this. Listen, I can't right now get more than 5 new patients in the day. It's just going to drag us down and stuff. So she's like, okay, no problem. So she put 5 on one day and then filled in my other rest of spots. And we'll say it definitely wasn't a 20 patient day, but we'll say maybe it was a 12 to 15 full patient load day or that day. Well, of the 5 new patients, only 1 showed up. And even of the follow up patients, I think half, maybe just over half showed up. So I really spent an entire day and lost all that, patient care stuff. So, you might be like, oh, that's not a big deal. This happens all the time. But, in any realm, I'm going to explain why it is a big deal and why you should think about these things and some tactics that I'm using that may be able to be replicated in yours. And if you guys have more advice, I would love to talk about it more and discuss them. So it all breaks down to um, time for money, right? That's unfortunately that's all any of us are doing in the healthcare industry or any industry and anything. We are exchanging our time for services that the insurance companies would like not to reimburse, but they do reimburse when they reimburse, and not appropriately. But long story. So you think about this, it's like, oh well, that's fine if the physician's not getting paid. Okay, too bad, Dr. Verma. Too bad, Nick Hill. Your money's gone. It's like, well, no. Let's think about this. It took time for my staff to pick up that phone, schedule the patient, make sure the patient's insurance was accepted, and say this is only 5 minutes. That's still 5 minutes for a time that she could have been doing other things. Now we have a waiting list of patients. Now, not only did the next patient that call in that wanted that time slot not be able to see for that time frame, and now they might get pushed back a day, a week, longer sometimes. Hopefully not, but that's a reality. Now I lost not only that first patient, but we know that patient turnover is going to happen. We also know that patients would like to be seen sooner than later. In fact, they'll call around different offices just to be seen sooner. So if we can't promise a quicker turnaround because someone else took that spot, so that's another thing that you have to put in consideration. Say a patient misses a procedure. Well, now we have a team that did a prior authorization. That takes time and money. How does that calculate into the equation? And even more, if I'm doing a procedure, I had to look into what equipment I might need for that procedure, what I procedure I was going to do, make sure that the x-ray tech is available and all these things. Like now I'm paying for the x-ray tech's time. All the equipment costs money. Um, and you're like, well, you're going to use that anyways. Like, well, no, that's not the point, because yes, you will use it at some point, but the idea is that you are going to use it for that patient at that time. So it should all be compiled into that useful tool. So all this, again, time for money, and that's kind of where the difficultiness arises, because things come up. Baby gets sick, get in a car accident, had to be in the hospital for other reasons, and none of this is to be punitive to individuals and try to call them out or anything like that. But the idea is like, in fact, it costs time and money. And this is why a lot of places, especially high-end places, have cancellation policies. Other places may not, but it's important. Even if you get your haircut, it's the same reason why a lot of haircut places, if you book online, they're going to charge a fee, and sometimes the fees are just as much, if not more, than the haircut itself. And it's because their time is valuable. If they're not making money in those hours, it gets difficult to run a hair salon or a barbershop or whatever. So, just making that story like so obviously that day, not only was it a lost day for me because I had to go work and didn't make the revenue, but I still have to go pay the company, my business has to still pay my staff and their time. Now that day in a totality was a complete loss, and not necessarily saying that it's supposed to fall on the shoulders of the patient and they should pay for everything, but it's like any other business. You go to Target and you buy something from Target so they can acquire more things that people want to buy. And it's the same in the practice. If you want to grow these things, it's cyclical and you want these things to come through. So that'll fast forward to today, and I will tell you how I'm combating it and some things to look out for. My colleague said, what are people doing for these? Because I had fit. He runs it. He works in a very successful, very busy practice, and he's seeing 50, 60 patients a day. He has MAs and nurse practitioners and help, so it's not all him, but this is where he's running. And he's like, out of all the 52 patients, only 42 showed up. I forget the exact number, but those 10 patients, again, that's his time, that's his staff's time, the scheduler's time. And you're expecting patients that want to be seen, because he lives in a little rural community. They want to be seen, and they need to be seen now, because now you're taking a spot for someone else. Like, I don't know about anyone else, but if I see a 50 plus person schedule, I'm going to say, all right, we got to be sharp today. Everyone on point, because the reason we're double booked and all this stuff is for a reason, not because we have plenty of spots the rest of the week. It's everything's booked up and patients are waiting. So I think that's an important point to remember. Now, on the counterpoint, if you're a big practice and there's competition all around the place, I think if a patient no-shows, just give them the benefit of the doubt and, give them a phone call, send them an email, or send them a text message. If they've opted into that, call out to the referring physician's office and just say, hey, just let you know this happened. If you want to rearrange something, let us know. And usually the provider will contact them, or the provider's practice. But the story is, what do you do? And it sparked up a pretty interesting, it wasn't really a debate, it was just a discussion. And, I have a fee associated with no-show fees for established patients. I don't have anything really for new patients, but anyone that becomes an existing patient is like, hey, we're not trying to be manipulative and we're not trying to take your money just to take your money, but these are the reasons why we're doing it. And we have it in our bylaws. So when a patient signs in, they understand if they have a no-show, that's the thing. And I'm saying literal no-shows with no explanation, no phone calls, no rescheduling, and all that stuff. we're not, again, trying to be punitive to patients that, like, I got sick, I'm sorry, or I've even given people the benefit of the doubt of, I forgot, I'm so sorry, I'm on my way right now. Well, I can't squeeze you in, but you called, so we'll get you on the next availability. You know, this is, real. Like, some patients are like, oh, I'm out of town, forgot to call in. Okay, that's, um, all these things are reasonable, and I'm not trying to punish these people, but other people try to take advantage of the system, and that is a problem. And um, not always a problem for the workflow of my practice, but it's also a problem for the other patients. Again, patients that need to be seen that are on the wait list. Or what happened this other week is a patient showed up an hour and a half late and still wanted to be seen. I told them I might be able to see them, but an hour and a half later, I had 4 patients waiting for me. And it's, how do you balance that? And you do the best you can. And, I had to stay late, but that's part of the things I've given up, the freedoms I've given up for going into private practice and all that. Nonetheless, the idea of, what do we do? So I think adding a nominal but not destructive charge, something that is affordable but can show a patient, like, okay, listen, these things happen. I charge a little bit more for procedures for mainly the reasons I said, prior auth team, the equipment, having the rad tech there, all these other things. Now, this is how I handle it. This was recommended to me from mentors and physician groups. And I think it's a reasonable thing. But the more important thing is, I think, what is that patient's experience coming into your practice? From once that patient picks up the phone and calls you for an appointment, or your staff calls them for an appointment, what does that picture look like? If we can start closing the gap and eliminating sections of this in each part, then we can go forward and help our patients better and help our overhead better, and get our bottom line improved. So what does that look like? The person that's scheduling, your scheduler, they should really look at your schedule and say, when is an appropriate time to get this patient in? That being said, don't put it out 3-4 months. If you're that's how late out you're booking, that's completely understanding. You're doing it, you're crushing it, great. But let them know, like, hey, our next availability is this, but if you can't make it here, let us know, because we have other patients that need to be seen as well. And I think it's okay to tell patients that, like, our next availability is March 31st at this time. And, is that going to work for you? They're either going to say yes or no. And you kind of go from there. Quite often patients will need, I can only come on Tuesdays, I can only come on Thursdays. And you say, okay, my next availability. And note that the terminology should be kind of like that. Is our next availability, or his next availability, her next availability, our next availability is this day, not what day works for you. You can always entertain them saying that back, but and this isn't to be manipulative. This is not to, like, force them into a time slot, but we know when a patient delays when they're seen, they're less likely to be seen, and more things come up, and they might go to another physician. All those things do occur. So getting them on the books sooner than later is one of the key points. And even telling them, we will put you on a wait list because we're booked out, but if anything falls off, we'll call you on the wait list priority. And that's important because people cancel same week all the time. And sometimes it's hard to fill those spots. So that's the first thing, it's that experience. And next is, leading up to the appointment, does the patient know what to expect? Or how are they going to be treated? All that stuff. And the scheduler can walk them through it that day. My MA scheduler, she does a great job to tell them all the things to expect between when she hangs up that phone and when she comes in, and to email us and she emails them with consent, reminders and all that stuff right there and then, just so the patient, okay, great, that's awesome, perfect, they sent it to me, makes me feel great. And that helps a lot to decrease the churn and patient turnover. The next thing is, say we'll use the March 31st again for the example of, okay, what happens the week leading up to it? So I think we've all been to doctor's appointments or any appointments nowadays where not only do you get an email, you get a text message 72 hours before and 24 hours before. These aren't arbitrary numbers. These are actually backed by data that I'd like to see now if those data would still uphold, because I don't think they would, because I think people are getting so used to these messages that they're deleting them. That's not the point. But this is the industry standard, if you will, of how to respond, which is completely fine. We have an automated system hooked up to our electronic medical record system in Athena, and to help us with that. And the other thing that we have available is we kind of will we know which referring physicians has had the highest cancel rates. We kind of put a little bit more reminders in that bucket, and that reminder can look like calling them 1 to 3 days before the appointment and say, hey, just a reminder, you have an appointment coming up on this date. Do you have any questions? Did you do the intake paperwork? Which is, we can see if they've done the intake paperwork, obviously, or not. And all these things, answer any questions. And, sometimes they'll ask, how long is an appointment going to be? It's like, typically our appointments run about 25 to 35 minutes. Just everyone's a little bit different though. And based on, how many complaints you have and et cetera, and how extensive your workup's been, all these things matter. But that is another way to eliminate that churn and patients not showing up. Now you might say, well, I see X amount of patients a day. There's no way I can call every patient. And I understand that. I'm not saying you need to call every patient. But if your biggest worry is drop off of new patients or patients that continuously cancel, it might be worth your time to have your schedule call or have some sort of communication, a line of communication. This will save you headache, and it'll save you time, and it'll save you a lot of things. It'll save you money, as we know. And I think that's a big point to have and to remember. And then the last point, I want to kind of follow up with on this. How do we make sure the patients come in the doors? When they do come in, make sure that you're living up to the expectations that they were having. So when they do go leave your review, they give a positive review of how their experience was and what, other things that I expect. A fantastic way to litmus test all this is to sit down and you as a practice owner, you as a practitioner, however you want to label yourself, is what does it look like when a patient calls in? And this was the very thought experiment that I did when I first started my practice. What does it look like when I call to schedule an appointment and every step along the way? You can take this one step further and hire a, serial or a ghost person or, friend, and have them go through the experience and just let them explain to you. That way your staff doesn't know that, oh, this person's just testing the market and seeing. They can give you honest and real feedback. And then when you write out the report, you go take it to your staff members and show them and ask them, where in this process did we miss something? What are your challenges? What are your pain points, et cetera, et cetera. I know this because I'm looking into some key performance indicators, and I have a whole video about how key performance indicators are not what people want it to make it out to be. And we'll definitely talk about that probably next week or the next few weeks. But it's an interesting concept of, I'm seeing stuff I've talked about in this video slipping through the cracks in my practice, and I need to re-educate my staff. Again, the most important thing is getting that patient on the schedule as soon as possible. when availability is there, and then tell them, hey, we have a wait list, and then make the wait list. Make sure that we call these specific patients, and maybe it's only 3 to 5 of the new patients. It doesn't have to be all 20, and I think that will go a long way too. And finally, I think the last thing is just making sure that the patient experience itself is enjoyable. It's funny, I could keep saying lastly because I'm adding on, but the concepts were kind of merging together in the summary there. So, anyways, so these are some interesting things. You're going to have companies out there coming after you saying, oh, yeah, we can help with all this. We can help with that. And then they're going to show you key performance indicators that are not true. So that's kind of where I was taking that. And I'll definitely talk about it more next time. And there are companies that can help you out with this, but don't take for granted what these people are trying to tell you. It's like, oh, make sure you have a text message service, make sure you have a phone call service, or because all of this stuff may be just costing you more money if patients are going to cancel anyway. I mean, for me, honestly, I ignore 99% of the text messages that come through my phone that aren't a number. And this includes follow-up appointments because they're on my Google Calendar. And for any eye appointments, dentist, personal training, and anything, it's on my Google Calendar. So I don't care if I get a text message. And I think most people are kind of a little bit getting immune to that. I think that the future is going to be really interesting with this because I think what it's going to be is some sort of video messaging system. And I think that will be an absolute game changer. So if any of you are out there smart enough to figure that out, how we can get some AI related content or even video related content that people will actually open, I think that would be absolutely huge. I actually have a few ideas, not that I want to, a lot of HIPAA things that you need to be conscientious about. But anyways, I hope you guys find this useful. I love doing this, as we know. Hopefully everyone out there is having a good year so far. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comment section below. You always open on the social media outlets, and hopefully we'll talk soon. And extending that invite to anyone that wants to come shadow or talk, happy to dedicate some time for you guys. All right, have a good one. Talk to you soon. Bye.